cruel laughter and buzzing clippers drowned out her desperate sobs beneath the diner's fluorescent lights. To them, she was just an invisible, fat waitress, a pathetic target for a viral prank. They were completely unaware that the trembling woman on the linoleum floor was secretly married to Chicago's deadliest mafia boss. Penelope Gallagher loved the smell of cherry pie and stale coffee. To most, the Midnight Owl Diner was just a greasy spoon on the edge of downtown Chicago, a place where insomniacs and third-shift workers haunted the vinyl booths. But to Penelope, it was a sanctuary of normalcy. At 240 pounds, Penelope was a soft, heavy-set woman with a heart-shaped face, a cascade of thick chestnut hair, and a gentle demeanor. She had spent most of her life being overlooked or openly mocked for her size. She was used to being the invisible fat girl. What the world didn't know, however, was that Penelope wasn't invisible to everyone. When her shift ended and she swapped her ketchup-stained apron for a winter coat, she went home to a sprawling, heavily guarded penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. She went home to Dominic Rossi. Dominic was the head of the Rossi Syndicate, a man whose name was whispered with terror in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Ruthless, calculating, and impossibly wealthy, Dominic was the undeniable king of the city's underbelly. Yet, behind closed doors, the terrifying mafia boss worshipped the ground Penelope walked on. He revered every curve, every soft edge, and every stretch mark on her body. He treated her like a goddess, but Penelope had begged him to let her keep her diner job. She needed the grounding reality of pouring coffee and wiping tables, a desperate tether to the innocent world she had known before marrying a monster. Reluctantly, Dominic had agreed, on the condition that 2 undercover guards were always stationed outside. But tonight, a freak blizzard had gridlocked the city, delaying the shift change for her detail. Penelope was alone. The diner bell chimed at 1:15 a.m., letting in a gust of freezing wind and a trio of entitled nightmares. Brandon Hayes, Tiffany Croft, and Kyle Preston stumbled through the door, reeking of expensive tequila and cheap malice. They were the children of Chicago's elite, hedge fund managers, politicians, and real estate moguls. They operated under the delusion that their parents' money made them untouchable gods. "Ew, this place smells like poverty and deep fryer grease," Tiffany sneered, wiping snow from her designer fur coat. "Just sit down, Tiff. I need black coffee before my dad realizes I crashed the Porsche," Brandon slurred, sliding into Penelope's section. Kyle, a massive college linebacker with a mean streak, laughed obnoxiously and slammed his fist on the table. Penelope approached with her standard warm smile, holding her notepad. "Welcome to the Midnight Owl. Can I get you folks some coffee to start?" Brandon looked Penelope up and down, his eyes lingering maliciously on her wide hips and heavy thighs. "Well, aren't you a hearty one? Let me guess, you eat the leftover pancakes in the back?" Penelope felt the familiar sting of humiliation prick her cheeks, but she kept her voice perfectly level. "3 coffees, coming right up." As she turned to walk away, Tiffany snickered. "Careful, the floorboards might cave in." Penelope retreated behind the counter, her hands shaking slightly as she poured the coffee. Gary, the night manager, was meticulously counting receipts in the back office, blissfully ignoring the tension. Penelope took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was Penelope Rossi. She was loved by a man who could buy and sell these children with pocket change. She didn't need to let their cruelty break her. She carried the tray back to their booth. "Here are your coffees. Are we ready to order?" "Actually," Brandon said, sticking his expensive leather loafer out into the aisle just as Penelope stepped forward. The heavy waitress tripped. She tried to catch her balance, but her momentum carried her forward. The tray tipped, sending 3 scalding mugs of black coffee crashing down onto the table, splashing directly onto Tiffany's lap and her limited edition Birkin bag. Tiffany let out an ear-piercing shriek. "My bag, you fat, clumsy cow. Do you know how much this costs? It's worth more than your miserable life." Penelope scrambled to grab napkins, her heart pounding. "I'm so sorry, he tripped me. Let me help you dry it." "Don't touch it with your greasy sausage fingers," Tiffany screamed, standing up and shoving Penelope hard in the chest. Penelope stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the adjacent table and falling heavily to the linoleum floor. Gary rushed out of the office, his eyes wide. "What's going on here? Your massive pig of a waitress just ruined my $20,000 bag," Tiffany shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Penelope. "I want her fired, now, and I want compensation." Gary, a notoriously cowardly man, looked at Brandon and instantly recognized him from the local society pages. Terrified of a lawsuit from the Hayes family, Gary visibly folded. I'm so sorry, Mr. Hayes." "Miss Croft. Penelope, get in the back. You're done here." "Oh, she's not going anywhere," Brandon snarled, his drunkenness morphing into something dark and sadistic. He nodded to Kyle. "Block the door." Kyle lumbered over, locking the diner's front door and pulling down the closed blind. The only other patron, an elderly man in the corner, quietly slipped out the back emergency exit, terrified. "You think you can just ruin our night and waddle away?" Brandon stepped toward Penelope, who was still trying to push herself up from the floor. He kicked her hard in the thigh, sending her sprawling back down. "Please," Penelope gasped, the pain radiating up her leg. "I said I was sorry. Let me go." "Sorry doesn't fix a Birkin," Tiffany spat, rummaging through a shopping bag she had brought in with her. "You know, we were just at that luxury grooming launch party. Kyle got one of those heavy-duty cordless barber trimmers." She pulled a sleek, silver electric razor from the bag, her eyes flashing with a psychotic glee. "A fat, clumsy pig shouldn't have such nice hair. It's misleading." Penelope's eyes widened in sheer terror as she realized what they were intending to do. "No, no, please, don't touch me!" "Hold her down, Kyle," Brandon ordered, laughing as if this was the funniest joke in the world. Kyle grabbed Penelope's arms, his massive weight pinning her firmly to the greasy floor. She thrashed, screamed, and kicked, using every ounce of her heavy frame to fight back. But Kyle was too strong, and Brandon grabbed her legs, immobilizing her completely. "Gary, help me!" Penelope screamed, tears streaming down her plump cheeks. Gary looked away, literally retreating into his office and locking the door. Tiffany turned on the razor. The mechanical buzz filled the diner, sounding like a swarm of angry hornets. Penelope squeezed her eyes shut, sobbing hysterically as Tiffany grabbed a fistful of her beautiful long chestnut hair. The cold metal teeth of the razor bit into her scalp. Clumps of brown hair fell like dead leaves onto the white and black checkered floor. Penelope's sobs were raw, tearing at her throat as she felt the humiliating breeze of the diner's air conditioning hitting her exposed skin. "Look at her," Tiffany cackled, holding her phone in one hand to record the assault while she carelessly drove the clippers over Penelope's head with the other. The razor nicked Penelope's scalp in several places, leaving small trails of crimson dripping down the sides of her face, mixing with her tears. "This is going straight to my private story. Whale gets sheared at the midnight owl." Brandon was laughing so hard he had tears in his eyes, his foot resting casually on Penelope's ankle to keep her from kicking. "She looks like a giant, ugly bowling ball." For 3 agonizing minutes, they stripped Penelope of her dignity. When Tiffany finally clicked the razor off and tossed it onto the table, Penelope lay perfectly still. Her chest heaved with broken, jagged breaths. Her beautiful hair, the one feature she had always been undeniably confident about, was gone, replaced by a jagged, bleeding, uneven buzz cut. She didn't just weep for her hair. She wept because she knew what was about to happen. She knew her husband. "All right, we're out of here," Brandon said, suddenly looking a bit nervous as the adrenaline faded and the reality of what they had just done settled in. "Let's go to that club in River North." They turned toward the front door. Before Kyle could reach the deadbolt, the glass door shattered inward. The heavy metal frame was kicked off its hinges with such explosive force that it took Kyle down to the ground. The diner bell didn't chime. It screamed, flying across the room and smashing into the pie display case. The freezing winter air rushed into the diner, and with it came the Reaper himself. Dominic Rossi stepped through the shattered doorway. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal overcoat, leather gloves, and a silk tie. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked carved from marble. His dark eyes, usually cold and calculating, were currently burning with an apocalyptic, unholy rage. Behind him stepped Enzo, his terrifying, heavily scarred enforcer, holding a suppressed, tactical pistol at his side, completely unbothered by the illegality of open carrying a silenced weapon in downtown Chicago. The atmosphere in the diner instantly dropped 20 degrees. It wasn't just the broken door. It was the suffocating, crushing aura of absolute violence that Dominic Rossi carried with him. Brandon froze, his bravado evaporating instantly. He knew exactly who this man was. His father, the politician, had taken bribes from the Rossi syndicate for years. Brandon had been warned never, ever, to cross paths with the Rossi family. "Mr. Rossi," Brandon stuttered, his voice cracking like a terrified child. He tried to force a confident, networking smile. "What an unexpected honor. We're just, we had a little incident with a clumsy waitress. We're just dealing with some trash. We'll be out of your way." Dominic didn't even look at him. He didn't blink. He walked right past Brandon as if the wealthy frat boy didn't even exist. Dominic's eyes were fixed entirely on the floor, on the heavy-set, trembling woman curled into the fetal position amidst a sea of brown hair. When Dominic reached her, the terrifying Mafia Boss did something that made Brandon's blood run cold. Dominic Rossi dropped to his knees on the greasy, hair-covered floor. He didn't care about his bespoke suit. He stripped off his expensive cashmere overcoat and gently wrapped it around Penelope's shaking, wide shoulders. His gloved hands reached out, trembling with a tenderness that defied his monstrous reputation, and he gently cupped her tear-stained, chubby face. "Penny," Dominic whispered, his voice cracking with a devastation that sent shockwaves of terror through the room. "Amore mio, my beautiful wife. I'm here. I've got you." Brandon felt the air leave his lungs. Tiffany dropped her phone. It shattered on the linoleum, but the sound was deafening in the sudden, horrifying silence of the diner. Wife. The fat waitress they had just assaulted, mocked and shaved bald, was the wife of Dominic Rossi. Penelope let out a heart-breaking wail and buried her shaved, bleeding head into Dominic's chest. She clutched his silk tie with her heavy hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "Dom," she choked out. "Dom, they hurt me. They held me down." Dominic wrapped his arms around her large frame, holding her tightly against him, kissing the top of her bleeding, nicked scalp with furious devotion. "I know, Tesoro. I know. Close your eyes. Don't look at them anymore." He held her there for a long moment, simply rocking her on the floor of the ruined diner, letting her cry out the trauma as Enzo stood guard, his gun now casually pointed in the general direction of the three bullies, ensuring none of them moved a single muscle. Kyle was still on the floor near the door, his pants rapidly dampening as he lost control of his bladder. Tiffany was hyperventilating, her hands clamped over her mouth. Brandon looked like he was about to vomit. Finally, Dominic stood up. He carefully lifted Penelope off the floor, cradling all 240 pounds of her against his chest as effortlessly as if she were made of feathers. He turned to Enzo. "Put her in the armored SUV. Turn the heat all the way up. Tell the doctor to be waiting at the penthouse," Dominic ordered, his voice devoid of all the warmth it had held just a second ago. It was back to being a flat, dead monolith of ice. Enzo nodded respectfully, gently taking Penelope from Dominic's arms and escorting the sobbing woman out into the blizzard. Dominic slowly turned around to face the three college students. He cracked his neck, the popping sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent diner. He slowly began to peel off his leather gloves, finger by finger. "Mr. Rossi!" Brandon gasped, falling to his knees, his hands clasped together in desperate prayer. "I swear to God, we didn't know. We didn't know she was your wife. Please, my father is Senator Hayes. He works with you. He'll give you anything." Dominic dropped his gloves onto a nearby table. He picked up the silver clippers Tiffany had used, turning them over in his hands, inspecting the blood on the metal teeth. "You think," Dominic said, his voice a low, vibrating hum of absolute death, "that if she was just a waitress, if she didn't have my ring on her finger, that what you did to her would be acceptable?" Brandon opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Dominic stepped forward, the clippers in his hand, his eyes burning with the promise of a long, agonizing night. "You took something from my wife tonight. Now the Rossi Syndicate is going to take reparations." The diner was dead silent, except for the harsh winter wind howling through the shattered glass door. Dominic Rossi stood over the three trembling socialites, the bloody silver clippers resting heavily in his palm. Brandon Hayes, the arrogant son of Senator William Hayes, was hyperventilating on his knees, his designer clothes soaked in melting snow and fear. Tiffany Croft, heiress to the Croft real estate empire, pressed her back against a vinyl booth, her manicured hands shaking violently. Kyle Preston, the heavy linebacker who usually intimidated everyone on the Rush Street Club scene, remained frozen on the filthy linoleum floor. "You find amusement in hurting innocent women," Dominic whispered, his voice perfectly smooth and devoid of human empathy. He dropped the clippers onto the table next to her ruined designer bag. "You think wealth shields you from consequences, but your money is a pathetic illusion compared to my power." Kyle suddenly lunged, a desperate, drunken attempt to tackle the Mafia Boss. Dominic did not flinch. He simply sidestepped the massive college athlete, grabbed Kyle by the back of his thick neck, and smashed his face down onto the hard corner of the pie display case with sickening, extreme, brutal force. Glass shattered loudly. Kyle collapsed into a heap of unconscious meat, dark blood pooling rapidly beneath his fractured jaw. Tiffany screamed, a shrill sound of pure agony, but Dominic shot her a single, terrifying glare that instantly silenced her. "Your turn," Dominic commanded, stepping toward the trembling heiress. "Sit." Tiffany shook her head, tears ruining her expensive makeup, but Dominic gripped her shoulder and forced her violently into the booth. "My beautiful wife had beautiful hair," Dominic murmured, picking up the clippers again. "You thought you could steal her lovely crown. Now I am taking yours. Turn it on, now." "Please," Tiffany begged, sobbing uncontrollably. "My father knows powerful people at the Drake Hotel. We can pay you. I need my hair for the winter gala." Dominic remained entirely stone cold. He pressed the cold metal of the clippers against her pale cheek. Turn it on, or I will use a kitchen knife from the back." Trembling, Tiffany reached up and flicked the switch. The loud buzzing sound filled the room again. Dominic grabbed a huge fistful of her expensive blonde extensions and drove the razor straight down the middle of her scalp, leaving a stark, bare, bald strip behind. He did not stop. For 5 grueling minutes, he methodically shaved every single blonde strand from her head, ensuring it was as uneven and humiliating as what she had done to Penelope. When he finished, he tossed the bloody clippers onto her lap. Tiffany wept silently, clutching her bald, shivering head. Dominic finally turned to Brandon. The political senator son was sobbing, a pathetic puddle of extreme privilege. "Brandon Hayes," Dominic said softly, crouching down to meet his terrified eyes. "Your father, Senator Hayes, owes me $3 million from his failed casino lobbying scheme. I own his entire career. Tomorrow morning, your father will resign from the Senate in utter disgrace," Dominic promised quietly. "He will transfer all of his assets, including your trust fund and the Lake Forest estate, directly to a shell corporation owned entirely by my wife. You are going to be completely homeless, Brandon. You will be poorer than the innocent people you mock." Brandon gasped for air, clutching his tight chest. "You cannot do that." Dominic smiled, a dark, terrifying expression. "I just did. And if you ever speak the name of my wife again, I will kill you." Before leaving, Dominic walked over to the back office. He kicked the cheap wooden door open. Gary shrieked, cowering beneath his desk. "You watched them assault my wife," Dominic stated coldly, pulling a thick stack of $100 bills from his tailored coat pocket. He threw the cash onto the dirty desk. "This diner belongs to Penelope now. You are fired. If you are still in Chicago by tomorrow sunrise, Enzo will definitely find you." Dominic turned his back on the carnage, stepping out into the brutal winter storm, leaving the ruined, weeping socialites behind. Penelope sat on the edge of the massive marble bathtub in their penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. She stared blankly at her reflection in the sprawling bathroom mirror. Her beautiful, heavy chestnut hair was entirely gone. In its place was a jagged, raw, and bleeding scalp. She felt hideous. She felt exactly like the fat, ugly monster those cruel kids had called her. Tears streamed down her plump cheeks, dripping onto the silk robe Enzo had draped over her shaking shoulders. She heard the heavy oak door to the master suite open, followed by steady, reassuring footsteps approaching very slowly now. He walked into the bathroom and knelt directly before her, just as he had done on the filthy diner floor. He carefully removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing arms covered in intricate mob tattoos. He wet a soft linen cloth with warm water and gently, so gently, began to clean the dried blood from her scalp. "I look like a freak," Penelope whispered, her voice cracking with profound sorrow. "I am so fat and ugly, Dom. They were right. I am just a joke." Dominic stopped moving, his dark eyes locked onto her brown, beautiful ones. "Do not ever say that again," Dominic commanded, his voice trembling with a fierce, protective passion. "You are Penelope Rossi. You are the absolute, most beautiful, magnificent creature I have ever laid eyes on. Your curves, your softness, your heart, they are my religion." He cupped her cheeks, leaning in to kiss her forehead, right over a small nick left by the razor. "Hair does not make you a queen, Penny. Your soul makes you a queen. And those pathetic insects will never hurt you or anyone else again. I have destroyed them utterly. They are nothing but dust now." Penelope sniffled, resting her soft hands against his broad chest. "What did you do, Dominic?" He smiled, a soft, devoted expression reserved strictly for her alone. I took away their power. Tiffany Croft is completely bald. Brandon Hayes and his father are resigning, and their entire estate has been legally transferred into your name. You now own the Midnight Owl Diner, too. I fired Gary. Penelope gasped, her eyes widening in absolute shock. You bought the Hayes estate? Dom, that is worth millions. I do not know anything about running real estate or managing a diner. I was a waitress. You were never just a waitress, Dominic gently corrected her, kissing her lips softly. You were always my queen, hiding in the shadows. You wanted a normal life because you were afraid of the dark world I inhabit. But tonight proved that monsters exist everywhere, even in bright diners wearing expensive clothes. Let me protect you properly, Penny. Step out of the shadows. Rule by my side. Penelope looked at the man who had burned down the lives of the elite just to avenge her honor. She looked at her shaved head in the mirror and felt something suddenly shift. The fear that had dominated her entire life, the fear of being judged, mocked, and marginalized for her heavy body, was suddenly evaporating. She was loved unconditionally by the most feared man in Chicago. She was invincible. Penelope reached out, her thick fingers tracing the sharp, dangerous lines of his strong jaw. Okay, she breathed, her voice finding a new, solid strength. Teach me, Dom. Teach me how to run the diner. Teach me how to crush people like Brandon Hayes. Dominic smiled, his eyes flaring with immense pride and dark hunger. He pulled her into his lap, holding tight. I will teach you absolutely everything, he vowed, kissing the side of her neck. Over the next 6 months, Chicago witnessed the rise of a new underworld matriarch. Penelope Rossi did not hide her shaved head or her fat body. She embraced her striking new look, wearing custom silk suits that accented her wide hips and heavy curves. She transformed the Midnight Owl Diner into a high-end, exclusive front for the syndicate operations. She attended underground meetings with Dominic, sitting silently by his side, her mere presence terrifying the city-corrupt politicians and very violent mob bosses every day. She was no longer the invisible, constantly bullied waitress. She was the undisputed queen of the Rossi syndicate. As for her attackers, their absolute fates were sealed. Tiffany Croft, humiliated and stripped of her social standing, was exiled to a miserable, isolated rehabilitation center in rural Montana. Kyle Preston never played football again. The injuries he sustained against the pie case left him with a permanent limp and severe brain damage. Brandon Hayes and his disgraced father were forced to move into a tiny, dilapidated apartment on the city-dangerous South Side, desperately surviving on meager government food stamps now. One rainy afternoon, Penelope sat in her luxurious downtown office, reviewing the financial reports for her new business empire. Enzo knocked respectfully and entered, handing her a daily newspaper. The headline of the Chicago Tribune read, "Former Senator Hayes bankrupt, evicted." Penelope smiled, sipping her expensive dark roast coffee. Dominic walked up behind her, wrapping his strong, tattooed arms around her thick waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy, my queen?" he murmured, kissing her cheek. Penelope leaned back against his chest, feeling the absolute security and undeniable power of his devoted love radiating through her completely now. "Very happy," Penelope replied smoothly. The invisible waitress was gone. She was the queen, and the city was hers entirely. What an absolutely incredible journey of revenge and rebirth. Dominic proved that true love sees beyond appearances, and Penelope claimed her rightful crown as the Mafia Queen of Chicago. Did you enjoy watching those cruel bullies get exactly what they deserved? If this satisfying story kept you hooked, please hit that like button right now. Share this video with friends who love drama, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel.